Welcome to Learning Excel. My name is Raphael. In the previous video, we left off with one of the more common charts that we use on a daily basis, if you will, and that was the combo chart. Now, in this video I'm going to cover all the remaining common charts in the previous version of 2006, including 2016 and the previous versions, and that is the bubble, the area, the stock, the surface, and the radar. So I'm going to cover all these in this particular video, starting with the bubble. Now, from now on, I'm not going to go into the details of how to actually format these, as at this point, you probably have a good idea of how to insert charts, how to select charts, and how to format the charts and look at the certain properties each chart has. So I'm going to let you do that. So for now, I'm just going to briefly go over what each chart is and how it's used. So starting with the bubble chart. The bubble chart, very similar to the scatter chart. The only primary difference is that the size of the bubble is reflective based on the number. So here, as you can see, we've got Hawaii here, Arizona here, California here, and you can look at the percent. The smallest is California by percent, and as you can see, it's the smallest bubble. The Washington is the largest, and as you can see, Washington here is the largest. So when you create a bubble, it's going to take the values of the series and then base the bubble both on the X and Y axis, and then size the bubble accordingly. So that's one thing. Now, it's something that I don't use, but again, you should be at least familiar with it. So let's move on now to the area chart. The area chart, as you can see, and you may have noticed, it's very similar to the line chart. So an area chart is virtually identical to the line chart, with the difference being that the lines below are filled with different colors. So as you can see now, it's very similar, as I said, to the line chart that we've been talking about. So this would be the line, and this would be the line, and this would be the line. And then obviously it just covers the colors, so you can see the thickness of the colors immediately. So that's a good way of looking at it, and sometimes I use this also. So just remember, it's very similar to a line chart, the only primary difference being that it's filled in with different colors. So that's what an area does. So let's look at a stock. Now the stock, in honesty, I've never used it, but I certainly am aware of it, and I want you to be aware of it also. So here, as you can see, and it looks a little complicated, and for obviously, if you're monitoring stocks, then this is the format you're going to use. Now, the first thing you want to ask is, how did I get the data? So let me go to here is the website. So if you copy this and go to the website, you'll see this. And obviously now, if you'll notice here, these are the stocks, and these stocks basically reflect the opening price of the stock, the highest price of the stock of the day, the lowest, and the closing price. So this is how I got data. So all I did for when I did do it, which was in September, is I just basically copied this and then just pasted it here. So as you can see, I did it on the date here, and these reflect the 2 weeks of stocks of that particular stock that I was interested in. Now, the couple of things is, when you insert a stock, the order is very important. Data that's arranged in columns and rows in a specific order of a worksheet can be plotted for a stock chart. Stock charts can show fluctuations in stock prices. Now, this is very important. This is the order you must have them: open, high, low, close. So if you copy paste it and these are not in this particular order, then you're going to get incorrect results. So the order is very important. So how do you basically read a stock? Well, basically, this is called the wick. If you will see, this vertical bar is called a wick, and it basically represents high and low values of a stock. And the white, where you see the white square, if you will, and the black square on the wick, indicates the values of that day. So if I hover over this, for example, you can see the highest point of the wick and the date and the value. If I go low, or you can barely see it, it's low point, and then the data between in it is the referencing of the data. And the white, as I said, indicates values closed higher than the previous version, and the black represents the opposite, where the values indicated lower than the previous version. So as I said, this is obviously the date range, and then you can see how the specific stock for that day is occurring. So on the 21st, if you hover over this is the 21st of the opening, closing, middle, and then the stock the next day, and so on. Again, to be honest, I don't follow the stocks in this particular order, so I'm not very too familiar with this. But again, I know of it. So I'm going to let you actually discover this and format it as you wish. So let's move on. Now, as I said, these are, I indicated earlier when I started the charts that the red ones, the tabs, are more common ones that you probably use more frequently unless you're in a specified field. For example, obviously, if you're in a stock field, then certainly you will use this more frequently than others. But these are, in my opinion, these are the less frequently used. So let's move on to the surface. Now, the surface, as you'll notice here, if I press F9, there we go. No, that's okay. The surface, again, is one of those that is more related to a statistical value and topographical, and it gives you kind of a 3D interpretation of it. So this chart is useful when you want optimum combinations between two sets of data. Now here is giving you an example as a topographical map. Colors and patterns indicate areas that are in the same range of values. So here this is illustrating a 3D surface, and the 3D chart shows a 3D view of the data, which is can be imagined as this is the way they describe it, which is a good way, I guess, is a rubber sheet stretched over a 3D column chart. So imagine column charts peeking up here in a 3D, and if you put a blanket on it or a rubber sheet over it, this is how it would look. And it is typically used to show relationships between large amounts of data that would be otherwise difficult. And the color bands in this chart do not represent data series. Note that they indicate the differences between the values. So again, this is something that if you're in that field, you'll most likely use. I certainly have not used this at all, to be quite frank. But again, I am very familiar with all these charts and what they try to do. Now this chart, the last one of this particular yellow, is called the radar chart. Now I have used this, and I personally do like this because it can you can use it personally. I use this personally for myself, and if I'm trying to determine what characteristics do I have, and if you're strong, if you're honest about yourself and putting these real values, you can immediately detect which characteristic are you strong in and which characteristic you may be low in or you improve. So here, as an example, is find the best quarterback for football. So obviously this is fictitious. So you've got Bob, Sam, Bill, Matt, and they're just random numbers up to 5, from 1 to 5. That's the range I've given. And for each category of catching, I've given them a number for running, for throwing, for knowledge, and fitness. So I'm trying to determine who is the best quarterback with these characteristics. And the way you do that is obviously you go there and find the radar chart. Now, as you can see, it's starting from somewhat 0 here, since I've altered it, 0 plot area right up to 5, and 5 being the best. And what the radar does is the following. The radar chart, also known as what's called a spider chart, plots the values of each selected category along separate axes. These values start in the middle, as I mentioned, they start in the middle and extend outwards. The closer to the edge of these values is, the better the rating. So as you can see, because this is, let's say, 0 to 5, obviously 5 is the best. So as you can see, and it's highlighted here with a legend. So let's look at the orange one here. The orange one is Sam. He seems to be good at catching and not very good at throwing. So maybe we just want to eliminate him immediately because he's not a very good thrower if we're looking for a quarterback. As you can see, he's got 3.8. Then we can look at Bob, which is blue, and he's good at running. He's okay, I guess, in throwing. Let's look at this one. This one is catching, and this one is fitness. So if he's a good runner, maybe he should be a running back and not a quarterback. So again, this is a very good indication, and I personally like this, using it even personally, as I said. So this is how you use a radar chart. So at this point now, I'm going to close this. At this point, you should be very comfortable with what is a chart, how to select charts, how to format charts, and how to select a chart. That's the most important thing, I think, when you're talking about charts, is trying to figure out which chart to use when you have the data. If you're trying to find this kind of a analysis for an individual, then this would be ideal. Now, you could certainly use a column bar this and see the columns, a bar going up and down, or even a bar chart. But I personally like this one. But again, this is entirely up to you. So in the next video, what we're going to do now is talk about the charts in the green tab, the histogram, the waterfall, the Bertero, the tree map, the sunburst. And these are only in 2016. So if you're using a previous version of Excel, 2013 even, or before that, you will not have these. So you must have Excel, but at least be familiar with them even if you have a previous version of Excel. So I'm going to go over these just like I did just now, briefly go over them and what they mean and give you demonstrations of them. So I'm going to leave it here. We'll continue with the next video. So my name is Raphael, and this is Learning Excel. See you in the next video.